What exactly does Tresa mean to you if you were a buyer or seller in Toronto real estate? Again, if you are a wise buyer or seller, or if you are a new or old real estate agent and still have no clue what the changes are as of December 1st of 2023, this is a video you really don't want to miss. Hey, welcome back to AV Team Real Estate Channel. I'm Antonio, a local real estate agent in the GTA. To go right into the topic today, let's discuss Tresa, the new act for Ontario in regards to real estate. If you are not a licensed realtor, you might not have noticed that prior Tresa, we were always under REBA 2002 Act, rules that you probably adopted for the past 20 plus years. Tresa is the Trust in Real Estate Services Act, in case you want to know what exactly it means. I will also have the link to the official OREA website in the description below if you want to read it on your own with more details. To be clear, we are now officially on Tresa Phase 2 as of December 1st of 2023. At the time you watch this video, this is already in effect, and this has quite a significance to you if you are a buyer or seller in the real estate market in Ontario. I will say that after watching this video, if you happen to find a realtor and they don't know all these changes, you probably know that they are either not up to date or simply not professional enough, because there are many changes that can influence how you buy or sell in Ontario. Now let's discuss the first changes on the list, which is multiple and designated representation. Let me briefly describe the scenario in the past when multiple representation happens. We recognize that this constitutes multiple representation when you, as a buyer agent, and I, as a listing agent, work for the same real estate brokerage, and I list a property for sale on the brokerage behalf, while you represent a buyer interested in buying our brokerage listings. We also know that in these situations, the services we can provide to the buyer and the seller are restricted. Under this situation, most agents that work under the same brokerage would avoid it because any interest involved in money and motivation could end up causing trouble if they receive complaints and reported them to the real estate board. With the designated representation, now the brokerage can appoint a respective agent to fully represent and to fully advocate for the buyer and seller. So in my example, if I have a property listed for sale for the brokerage, I will be able to fully represent the seller. I will be able to give them advice about what they should accept, and likewise, if you represented the buyer, you would be able to fully advocate on behalf of the buyer. In the past, there was a gray area that had never been clear, and that's why it was always tricky. So under this new change, it is now much clearer when you can designate a representative to fully act in the interest of the buyer and seller under the same brokerage listing. Okay, so let's move on to the second change in Tresa in the self-represented party. Under the old REBA, there were two common types of consumers, clients and customers. Obviously, being a client, you will receive all the fiduciary duties from the agent you are working with, where the customer has limited service. But it was always confusing and blurry what a realtor could provide. But now it is super clear, and to clear out all the confusion, either you are a client or self-represented. It means that as a consumer, you are 100% a client or 100% not, or simply self-represented. There's no more vague representation between the client and the customer. For consumers, you probably can't differentiate between clients and customers. The best way to explain this is that when you sign the form working with a realtor as a consumer, right away you will have a choice to have a relationship with the realtor as a client or customer. In simple layman terms, if you are a client, basically a realtor will provide the full service and represent you in your best interest and solely for you. But as a customer, it is restricted, but of course it will treat you with honesty, fairness, and integrity. In the past, most realtors could still provide information about the property to the customer and could form opinions and advice to help as well, which kind of form a very confusing relationship. Now, in today's Tresa, what it means for you as a buyer or seller is that if you opted to be a client, your realtor will provide provide all the advice, years of knowledge, and full-on service to help your real estate transaction, just like before with REBA 2002 Act. If you are not a client, which means the consumer did not sign the representation agreement, the advice from the realtor will be restrictive. And specifically, if you ask the realtor for advice or an opinion, they will not share it under this new Tresa Act. For example, if you ask a realtor to bring you to see a property, they can educate you with information that is readily available to the public, but not anything that can be interpreted as their opinion, advice, or judgment. So for instance, they won't tell you how much a property could possibly sell for based on the advice or opinion of the realtor. For another example, if a buyer who chooses to be self-represented asks you to show them another brokerage listing, you can't. Tresa is clear that you can only provide assistance as a service provided to a client. Another brokerage seller is not your client. Traditionally, most realtors in the past were trained or coached by the brokerages when bringing buyers to see properties. The buyer should have the buyer representation agreement signed, but most of the realtor will try to show as much value and information as possible, hoping that they can make the business when the buyer decides to put in an offer and then get the signature. However, I think this new changes, Tresa can make it more apparent the benefit of being a client versus self-represented to push the consumer to make a decision earlier instead of feeling the disadvantage of being locked into being a client. In my opinion, unless the buyer or seller is well sophisticated and educated about the real estate transaction and willing to research how to negotiate with the seller and make all the necessary paperwork, these new changes will draw more consumers to sign the buyer representation agreement. I guess now the real estate agent has to become a better communicator in order to navigate the amount of information that they can disclose unless the consumer chooses to become a client. The alternative would be signing the buyer's representation on a specific property in which the buyer is interested. But if there are multiple properties that they wish to see, then there are going to be much more representations to be signed. Either way, I think the realtor would have to become much better communicators and be more transparent as to what options the consumer has. The third main change from the Tresa is the open offer process. This has been one of the most discussed complaints in the past. For the most part, most people blame blind bidding as the reason why home prices increased the most. On the REBA, only the number of offers on the table could be disclosed, but not the price, not the conditions that are included, the size of the deposit, the closing date, etc. The new change is that the seller now has a choice to share the content of the offer, such as the price, the deposit, conditions, or closing date, with other buyers. However, no personal information may be disclosed or other information that would identify the person making the offer. It is also important to note that the brokerage is still required to disclose the number of registered offers to competing buyers. But what happened in the event that the seller decides to change their mind halfway through the transaction and goes from a closed offer process to an open offer process? The closed offer process, which also refers to blind bidding, and the open offer process mean that the buyer's offer content could be disclosed. If the seller decides to change from a closed offer to an open offer, they will let every buyer know about the prices on the table, or the deposit, the term, the conditions, and the closing dates. The sellers can then decide to change the rules as long as that is notified. But the interesting part is that the buyer could include in their offer the agreement of purchase and sale with a clause the buyer could opt out and not participate in the offer if the seller decides to change the rules. It is important that the buyer's agent communicates well with the buyer and asks the buyer these questions about whether they would like the seller to disclose their offer to other buyers in the event that the seller decides to make an open offer. There will be a possibility that some buyers might agree with the seller and allow them to disclose the content of the offers and abide by the rules. But there are others who might not be comfortable and don't want the terms and price of the offer to be disclosed to any other buyers because they don't want other buyers to be able to use the number that they offer against theirs and pay more than they did to acquire the property. It will be a more open conversation that has to be had when deciding to put in an offer. In my opinion, the notion that in the past when we adopted the blind bidding, which is now called the closed offer process, the buyer could only blindly put an offer that sometimes they could put much more than the competing offer and hence cause the price to go up significantly. But you could also argue the price could go up in the open offer process, and at the end it depends on the buyer's maximum budget, but the difference is knowing the details of the competing offers. If prices tend to go up through the closed or open offer process, only time will tell. Please leave a comment below stating which of the two options you think it is better. The rest of the changes to Tresa are mainly about the disclosure of the written agreement, which are now more descriptive and detailed so that the sellers and buyers can have a better understanding of where all the money is distributed throughout the real estate transaction, including all commissions. The official website of the Tresa is linked in the description below. Feel free to go there and explore it on your own. I hope this video can clear out some of the questions you may have in regards to the Tresa Phase 2 that will take effect on December 1st of 2023. Don't hesitate to contact me with the Calendly link below if you wish to talk to me about all real estate related inquiries that you may have. And as always, like the video and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already done so. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.